To that very simple point, that we introduced sustainability requirements into our procurement process 3 years ago. So we won't procure from companies that don't comply with our requirements, sustainable requirements. We simply find that they are better suppliers. They compete on price, but they deliver on service much better than people who don't meet the sustainability requirements. And the care that they put into the sustainability practices tends to reflect the fact that they care more about their business, full stop.
Okay, Roger?
I'd like to try and answer that question, and also Sir Stuart Rose's challenge to me about how to do it. There's two concepts I'm going to share with you. One is localism, the other one is mutualism. And that is that the problem with supply chain is you don't know the people. It's too extended. Human forms of association only work when you have intimate or close knowledge of the people you're interacting with. The family, friendship, and neighbourhood are proven forms of human association. They go back before the written record, the archaeological record. They've lasted and have worked for tens of thousands of years. The modern corporation, the modern joint stock company, is a dysfunctional form of human association. Anthropologically and sociologically, it does not work. We live in what we think are free market liberal social democracies. The corporation is a feudal plutocracy led by people who represent the equivalent of the gun-toting bandits in Darfur, with some honourable exceptions. There's nothing wrong with business. Most SMEs are deeply sustainable because if they're not, they don't eat. Most businesses on the planet are family businesses. Their supply chain is their neighbour, the person in the town whom they trade with. I don't think we're going to get supply chain right by having neat systems and computers and all the rest of it. There is no substitute for flesh and flesh in terms of shaking hands, looking someone in the eye and making a judgment about their character and looking at the quality of behaviour. So I have every faith in business. The history is clear, but I think the modern corporation needs to be reset as well. Mutualism, localism. So Sir Stuart, delist, become a mutual, and M&S will embrace Plan B.
Surely you don't feel you need a right of reply at this stage.
I'll just respond to that, and it's not that much. I looked at it.
Ah.
The problem was it wasn't financially doable.
Ah. We need to reset money then.
We do.
Right, with that happy consensus, we have a question over here.
My name's Grattan Donnelly. I'm from the Association of Coaching. I have a personal interest around the sustainability discussion we're having, and I think everybody else does. And I'd just like to thank Roger for raising the point. For raising the point which I think is the elephant in the room. And I suppose I'm curious. I noticed there's an absence of the word sustainable growth, because to me that's an oxymoron, and we seem to be on this path where, and I think Roger has challenged the issue around resetting our thoughts on profit, economy, money, etc. So I suppose I'd like to throw that to the panel, and I'd be interested to hear from some of the panel in terms of what Gerard said about it's not about bouncing back, and a lot of our efforts at the moment are around, getting the economy back to where it was. It's about bouncing forward, and I think bouncing forward has to be a new paradigm, and I'd just like to throw that out there to the panel as a discussion point.
Okay, but it's going to be a very, very brief discussion point because we're coming towards the end. Let's just go across the panel, starting from going right to left.
Well, I have to say I almost profoundly disagree with much of what Roger has said. I am a businessman, I'm a parent, and I would make the point that yes, growth may be the pathology of the cancer cell, but actually they're not a self-aware organism. We want our children to grow up. We want our companies to grow, usually, because it means more people get jobs. We want our economy to grow. The bottom line is that whilst Roger might be nostalgic for the happiness of the 1950s, you'll not find many people in Ireland nostalgic for the 1950s. We've spent the past 3 years in this country getting demonstrably poorer, and I don't think we've gotten any happier as a result. I actually think sustainable growth is not an oxymoron. I think that's a big mistake. A lot of people who rightly advocate sustainability is to make it an either or. It can be both and.
But isn't it the case? I mean, I guess what Roger will get a chance to speak for himself. I guess what he's getting at is that you're on a finite planet. Sooner or later, human numbers have to stop increasing because they just can't keep going on forever. There's not enough space. At some point, you have to only consume a set number of resources to stay within the limits of the planet. So the question is, what kind of growth can you have within that kind of steady state economy? I guess is where we're coming from.
Well, take the example of whale oil. We were about to run out of it at the middle of the 19th century, and then suddenly we discovered that you could actually use carbon fuels to actually heat and power our machines. We thought we were going to run out of guano in the early 20th century until the Haber-Bosch methodology for creating using nitrogen to create fertilizer came along. What I think is happening right now is that the 6.5 billion people on this planet contain within them the people who will help us solve the problems. It is people working together using the genius and ability of human beings to creatively solve and sustain the things that we do that will provide the wealth, will provide the better standard of living, will rid the world of the curse of poverty and sustain us effectively in our countries and our world into the future.
Okay. Time, of course, is the ultimate limited resource, so I shouldn't ask supplementaries, really. I'm working against myself. Keep going around the circle.
Well, I mean, I'll be quite brief. The Olympics project, the rationale behind winning the bid or going for the bid was primarily that we wanted to regenerate a part of London which was taken out of really productive use. It was historically contaminated. The Olympics Games, as has already been said, is a global event. It has a global environmental footprint, a massive environmental footprint, as lots of people want to come and see it. I suppose what we tried to do with the bid is to kind of flip the approach from the norm. The norm is that you win the bid and then you build these huge venues that sit then vacant after you've won the Olympic Games. We went for a different approach, which was thinking, I think, relatively fresh thinking, which is about let's design a site for the long term. So let's not just think about the games. Let's use the games as a way of facilitating that long-term regeneration. It's enabled the government to put a lot of money into the regeneration of a site. It's unlocked that potential of the site. We're going to deliver around 10,000 new homes after the games. We're going to deliver a whole new ward, a new community. And all of that is about new urbanism, about getting people living in a new way. And we're starting to work actively with the legacy company who will take the site after the games around behaviour. How do we get those users, the new communities, to think differently, to buy locally, so that we can perhaps produce food locally within that site. So there is a lot of thinking going on about the future community, and really that's what we're using the games for.
Just 2 points. Firstly, we've talked very little about technology this morning, and I just want to, because it picks up on a point Roger made about localism, tell a story. We've been funding a project in northern Uganda for the last 3 years, and not just funding it, but writing about it every day. And one effect of this was that we posted all the budgets for the project on our website. And remarkably, somebody in a third country, neither Uganda nor the UK, read the budget and questioned why we'd appointed a Kampala contractor to build schools in northern Uganda, because they were ferrying their labour and their materials for hundreds of miles and it was adding to the cost of the project. People running the project in northern Uganda said, that's a really good point, we should go to a local contractor. They ditched the Kampala people and went for a local contractor. They saved money and they got a better job because it was people that they could look in the eye. But all of that was facilitated by this, and I think one of the things we haven't talked about this morning much is the fact that very shortly half the people on the planet will be connected through things like this, and that represents an incredible intellectual resource that's never been available before in the history of mankind. The second point I'd like to make is that what I've learned this morning is that philosophers do not buy their shirts at Marks and Spencer's.
Not yet.
Well done.
I suspect Roger might be getting some inquiries afterwards as to where he does buy his shirt. But Roger, very quickly, we are out of time. I'm getting panicked messages from over there. So
in part, I agree with you. You know, at a chemistry and physics level, there is abundant energy and molecules in and on this planet. The problem we face is that climate change is going to kill the Asian monsoon within a generation, and then we've got 2.5 billion people with no rice to eat. And the biggest threat is the destruction of biodiversity. That we are destroying biodiversity, which is giving rise to an incredible increase in autoimmune diseases. And so just to put that into context, this is the yuck moment before lunch. We as human beings are ecosystems that host about 1 billion flora and fauna in and on our body. If we don't see the destruction we're creating within our biosystem, we will die in the same way that we would die if we destroyed those billion life forms in and on our bodies. We cannot exist without other species. And one final point, I said that twice, but I'm going to have another final point. My research into the moral DNA of humanity, based on 40,000 people in 126 countries, tell us we have 2 overriding vices. Arrogance, which maps to the male gender, and greed, which maps to the female gender.
That's right. So, Roger, now that you've alienated the whole of the room, Sir Stuart, your final thoughts.
Very quickly. Roger's fulfilled his role here. He isn't a corporate philosopher for nothing, so that's he's been set here to challenge. It's a great shirt, Roger. We wouldn't sell many of those in Marks and Spencer, I think. I actually am an I take Roger's point. It's obviously very important to have a good dialogue where you get some good thorn under the saddle thinking. I am an unreconstructed capitalist. We've had a capitalist system for hundreds and hundreds of years. We haven't invented a better system. There was a system in Soviet Russia in the early part of the 20th century. It patently didn't work.
I agree.
I don't agree that the creation of wealth is wrong, and I don't believe any of you in this room would. What we could have a very healthy debate about is what do we do with the wealth when we have created it, because otherwise we wouldn't have places like this, and we wouldn't have schools, universities, roads, whatever else. So it's a good debate to be had. I absolutely agree with Gerard's point. I think never underestimate the capacity of human beings to innovate their way out of problems. So there will be great crises ahead. Thank God I might not see them because I might be dead by then. But we will solve the problems.
Excellent. Okay. And the final words then to James.
I'm just glad. I'm glad you actually took the mantle of the least popular on the stage back to yourself in the final moments. I guess that what I would say is just a couple of thoughts. One, the profit in the capitalist system is the how. Let me go back to the question: is sustainable growth sustainable? And just paint the idea. Well, what's the alternative? What's the alternative? You know, we might sit comfortably here in Western Europe. But Western Europe, the US, and the rest of the developed countries of the world is the tiny fraction of the population. There are billions of people who live on less than $1 a day, who can't have 3 square meals, don't have any energy, and die young. Now, if we can't have sustainable growth, we've got a choice. Sustainability, i.e. they stay poor and stay in the mud, or we have growth and destroy the world. Neither of those is going to be voted for by anyone unless we want to give up everything we have, which I don't see as likely to be voted on. Well, arrogance, agreed. You had your go. And therefore, I think the only challenge is to get growth while it's sustainable. It's about reducing the unit use of resources in every measure of growth we get, which is actually what's happening across the Western world. Every point of GDP growth, every decade, uses less and less resources to be generated as we move to service industries. That's not to say that we need to make another massive step change in the amount of resources per point of growth. But the Chinese and the Indians aren't going to give up on having our living standard. Therefore, we better be innovative in getting that done with 20% of the resources that we currently use today. Otherwise, it's not going to be pretty.
So that is the scale of the challenge. Thank you very much. I'm going to call on Tina in a moment just to make a couple of announcements. But before I do, can you please thank all of these speakers.